You pieces of trash, you work your candy asses off day after day after day, 9 to 5 for minimum wage. Of course, that's not me saying that. This is from one of the promos that The Rock did on Monday Night Raw years ago. And normally I would play it for you, but I know from experience that World Wrestling Entertainment is not shy with throwing out copyright claims and copyright strikes. So if you want to watch this promo later, you know what it's called. Go look it up. But let's talk about the minimum wage, because for those who have not been paying attention, recently our president-elect, jibber-jabbering Joe Biden, he demanded that Congress, particularly the congressional Democrats, they pass a bill that raises the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. And this has resulted in a debate on Twitter and other social media about whether or not the minimum wage should be raised, or whether or not we should have a minimum wage at all. I see a lot of people arguing. I see a lot of opponents, people against raising the minimum wage, bringing in economic arguments, saying that that this will cause consumer prices to increase, that this will result in layoffs, that this might result in business closures. And there is truth in all of that. All of that is true, but there's only one problem, folks. Nobody cares. The people that want to raise the minimum wage, these minimum wage warriors, they don't care. They don't care about your facts. They don't care about your charts. They don't care about your economic studies and reports. They don't care. And here's one of the points. This tweet went viral by a gentleman named Josh Raby. As you can see, he says, "I manage a restaurant with dozens upon dozens of employees. $15 an hour is good. We will be fine. The burgers won't go up that much. They'll go up a little." So you can see right here, he's well aware of some of the consequences of raising the minimum wage. And I've seen a lot of this. People bickering over whether or not the cost of a Big Mac, the cost of a Quarter Pounder with cheese, the cost of a Whopper, the cost of a Frosty at Wendy's, whether or not that will go up. And a lot of people are like, yeah, it won't go up that much. We can afford it if it means paying workers a living wage. They don't care, folks. And he goes on to say, the money added to the pockets will be more. We've done the math. Stop pretending you've done it for us. So I don't know who elected this guy to be the spokesman on behalf of all the businesses in America, but apparently he feels comfortable speaking on behalf of every business in America, because he's done the math, folks. Of course, this issue about price increases, yeah, prices will go up. And of course, for the most desperate out there, the destitute, people who are already on the brink, people who might rely on the dollar menu and cheap fast food because they don't know how to cook at home. And even if they do, they might not have the proper utensils. So they rely a lot on cheap fast food. Not that's ideal, but it will be harder for them to afford food. It will be harder for them to afford groceries. But hey, we can afford it because living wage. This might result in businesses closing. They don't care, folks. Here's a tweet from Fight for Chicago. As you can see, 22,000 followers. Says, if you can't afford to pay a living wage, you can't afford to be in business. And I've seen this sentiment shared a lot over the years. I remember Tom Hartman said this in a segment once.
If a corporation won't pay a living wage, then it shouldn't have the right to exist. Period. End of story.
If a business cannot afford to pay a living wage, then it does not have the right to exist. So they don't care. If this causes businesses to close and jobs to disappear as a result, they don't care. Because apparently, being unemployed is preferable to getting exploited, folks. They don't care. I feel like I'm Batman from The Dark Knight Rises. You remember this, folks?
They know. They just don't care.
They know. They just don't care. The economics do not matter. And here I am thinking, what about people who might be willing to sell their services at under the current minimum wage? Because I'm an advocate of getting rid of the minimum wage altogether. I think it's federally $7.25 an hour. In some states, it's more than others. But I'm over here, what if someone wants to sell their services at $5 an hour? I mean, it's kind of already happening on sites like Fiverr. Fiverr, for those who don't know, it's a website where people can offer their services at whatever rates they wish. It's also happening on this other service called Thumbtack that I just learned about. As you can see, you can offer, yoga services, electrician repair, furniture moving, house cleaning, essential home services. Where are all these minimum wage warriors? Are they monitoring these websites to make sure no one's offering to mow lawns or unclog a sink for $6 an hour? Because remember, that should be illegal, folks. What if you're on Fiverr? So there's this one service, one artist offers their service at $5. What if it takes them an hour or longer to complete this task? They are offering their services at under the minimum wage. Why aren't we getting lawyers involved in this? Why aren't we getting law enforcement involved in this? This is an injustice, folks. What's the difference between getting exploited by strangers all over the world and getting exploited by the mom and pop 2 blocks down the street? Or what about, the titans of industry from the 19th century, people like Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, James J. Hill? I know Carnegie, when he was a kid, when he was a preteen, he would work reading Morse code for a train station for what would be today $35 a week. And I can't help but wonder, what if Andrew Carnegie, what if he never got that job? What if the government said, whoa, Carnegie, you're getting exploited there. You're not allowed to work at such low wages. Would he have ever developed the skills? Would he have ever gotten promoted? Would he ever have become the steel titan that he became if he'd not gotten that first job? What about people today? I just gave you some concretes. How many people are out there today, teenagers, retirees? I remember reading a story years ago, why senior citizens are replacing teenagers as fast food workers. I remember reading a story years ago, and I can't find it. But it was a story about how retirees are going to work at fast food restaurants in places like Walmart. Not necessarily because they're desperate, not necessarily because they need the money, but rather because it gets them off the couch, it gets them out of the house, it gets them socializing, meeting new people, gets their gears grinding. You can see it in this story right here. A 63-year-old retired construction worker says, it's fun for a while, not getting up, not having to punch a clock, not having to get out of bed and grind every day. But after working all your life, sitting around got old. There's only so many trips to Walmart you can take. And now this retired guy apparently manages 13 employees, works 70 hours a week. And he says, I enjoy Church's Chicken. I enjoy the atmosphere. I enjoy the people. Now, if you were to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, maybe he never takes that job. Maybe he never enjoys life like he is now because you've made it illegal for him to offer his services at below $15 an hour. How many people out there right now, teenagers, young adults, who they might be willing to sell their services at $5, $6 an hour, and it's illegal for them to do. And what if they live in a crappy neighborhood, go to crappy schools, have nothing to do, and they're willing to sell their services, and they're not allowed to? Who knows what these kids are doing? They might be resorting to the black market, resorting to selling drugs. Maybe they're resorting to going into debt. Right? Maybe they're taking on debt that they don't have to because they can't find a job. Maybe they're resorting to government handouts, welfare, which I cannot blame them for doing so, because the government has made it illegal for them to work. I remember this was a point with Bill Maher a few years ago. I remember this meme going around. Bill Maher apparently said the question the right has to answer: do you want smaller government with less handouts, or do you want a low minimum wage? Because you cannot have both. If Colonel Sanders is not going to pay the lady behind the counter enough to live on, then Uncle Sam has to do so. And I, for one, am getting a little tired of helping highly profitable companies pay their workers. And now this is a false dichotomy. I think ideally there should be no welfare state, no minimum wage. But if I were given these options, I'd rather have no minimum wage with welfare handouts, because at least then people can have the opportunity to get in the labor market. At least they have the opportunity to sell their services, and maybe eventually they'll get promoted. They'll pull themselves up to the point where they're not asking for handouts. They're out of poverty to the point where they're not relying on welfare and other forms of government assistance. Is it right to sacrifice the rights of people who would be willing to sell their services for under the minimum wage for a handful of people who might be currently working $12 to $14 an hour and would get a slight pay bump? Because to hell to everyone who's working 7 to 10. And some people have said, yes. You know, I got into it with a gentleman the other day, one of my mutuals. Now, before I go on, I want to say that this guy, I like this guy. We just had a disagreement. This is not me trying to dunk on him. This is not me trying to destroy him with facts and logic. But we got into it. I said that both antitrust and minimum wage laws need to go into the shredder. As you can see, he disagreed. It got to a point where I said, if someone wants to accept a job for less than the arbitrary minimum wage, then tough shit, absolutely not. And he says, I look at what's better in the aggregate. Abolish the minimum wage, and you're hurting the majority of workers who work those types of jobs. They literally will not be able to subsist themselves. And I said, you're essentially justifying your position, which I'm not even sure is accurate, on sacrificing the rights of some for the sake of the majority, or for the sake of some precious pressure group. I'd be careful operating on such a principle. And the reason why I bring this up is because the next day, he happened to tweet this out saying, all those ex-multi-billionaire could eliminate world hunger but refuses to do so takes are so stupid because, yeah, the first will run out of his money, but what happens when all of the money runs out? And I responded, the people who make those kinds of posts, the people who say Jeff Bezos has enough money to end world hunger and chooses not to. Jeff Bezos has $200 billion. Of course, we know that's all tied up in Amazon shares. He doesn't have $200 billion in cash just lying under his bed. But people say, oh, he has enough money to end world hunger and he chooses not to. According to the United Nations, it would only cost $7 billion or whatever to eradicate world hunger, and the billionaires of the world choose not to. And this is how you get proposed wealth taxes from people like Bolshevik Bernie Sanders and goofy Elizabeth Warren. This is why people advocate for more taxes on the rich. This is why you see guillotines being built out of Jeff Bezos' house, because people are like, yeah, it's, you know, we should totally sacrifice the rights of billionaires and people like Jeff Bezos because people are starving. They need his wealth. They need his money. This you see this a lot from apologists for communist dictatorships. I see it all the time whenever you bring up the kulaks and the dekulakization during the early years of the Soviet Union. A lot of apologists say, well, the kulaks, they were selfish. They didn't want to give up their land. They were hoarding all their grain and all their food. You know, the kulaks deserved worse. That's where this premise gets you. And so we ended up getting into it some more, and he asked me for more proof that gutting the minimum wage doesn't necessarily result in lower wages. And if you look at the Gilded Age, during the Gilded Age, the Census Bureau reported in 1892 that the average annual wage per industrial worker, including men, women, and children, rose from $380 in 1880 to $564 in 1890, a gain of 48%. A 48% in wage increases over 3 decades. This was without any minimum wage laws, folks. Economic historian Clarence D. Long estimates that in terms of constant 1914 dollars, the average annual incomes of all American non-farm employees rose from $375 in 1870 to $395 in 1880 and $519 in 1890 and $573 in 1900, a 53% gain in 30 years. Of course, we also have Henry Ford's famous $5 workday, which he offered without, government regulators breathing down his neck, without any wage laws, minimum wage laws. If you read this article, Henry Ford did it not out of the kindness of his heart, but rather because, as you can see here, he was experiencing a lot of turnover and it was costing him a lot of money. Many simply quit and Ford itself had a crippling 370% turnover rate. The assembly line depended on a steady crew of employees to staff it, and training replacements was expensive. Ford reasoned that a bigger paycheck might make the factory's tedium more tolerable. On top of that, if you read more, apparently there were strings attached. Henry Ford thought that if his workers made more money, that there would be less money problems at home, they'd be less stressed out, and as a result, they'd probably be more productive on the job. There's also a lot to say about this concept of a living wage, which is total bullshit, given that not everyone is going to have the same needs, the same living standards, and also, if it's not clear enough, not everyone who looks for a job needs a wage that will support a family of four or whatever. You're going to have a lot of teenagers who rely more on their parents. You're going to have retirees who are looking for something to do instead of just sitting at home all day. You're going to be looking for people who might already be employed but might want a side hustle of some sort where they're only working $10 or 10 hours a week on a rather low maintenance job. That's definitely the case with services like Uber and Lyft, who have been criticized for not guaranteeing a steady, quote unquote, living wage. Also, see this talking point a lot. I never hear concerns about how the McDonald's CEO is making $18 million, might drive up the price of a Big Mac. Well, no one's advocating for a government imposed minimum wage on business executives. But I've seen people like Bernie Sanders make a similar point, saying that don't tell me that McDonald's can't pay their workers a living wage, a $15 an hour living wage, when their CEO makes millions of dollars. Of course, if you just look into this really quick, as you can see right here, McDonald's has 200,000 employees, or 1.9 million if you include franchises. And so if you go by the 200,000 figure, if you were to take all of the CEO's money, if you were to just reduce that to zero, ask the CEO to work for free, which is ridiculous, but if you were to do that, the 200,000 workers, they would only get an extra $90 for the entire year. If you did it to the 2 million, they'd only get $9 for the entire year. And it's also worth noting that a company like McDonald's is based on a franchise model. A lot of locations, believe it or not, are what you might consider small mom and pop businesses or owned by a single owner who has to pay dues to the McDonald's corporation. So it's not like the CEO of McDonald's is overseeing all of the people in America who work at McDonald's. No, it's usually a small business over. I think over half of the franchises in America are franchise. So I will end by saying this. Yeah, the economic arguments are important, but at the end of the day, the people who are advocating for raising the minimum wage, they don't care. And even the ones who might care, as I've demonstrated, they might be operating on some bad premises that need to be addressed. Bottom line is, the minimum wage is bullshit.